My name's Chase, and I'm 40. If you met me today, you'd see a calm, well-dressed guy who built $1 million logistics startup, lives in a quiet waterfront condo, and doesn't say much about his past. But rewind just a year ago, and I was standing barefoot on a cracked driveway at 2 a.m., holding a torn duffel bag and a hoodie that barely kept the wind off me, after being thrown out of my own home like garbage. My wife, Kelly, screamed at me from the porch with venom in her voice I'd never heard before. "You disgust me. Don't ever come back." And the worst part? I didn't even fight it. I just walked. The truth didn't matter to her. What mattered was the lie my brother told her, and she believed him without hesitation. It still feels unreal when I replay that night in my head. Sometimes I wonder if it started way before then. The cracks, the shifting loyalties, the subtle digs from my brother that I ignored for too long. His name's Brian, by the way, 2 years younger than me. Always the louder one, the charming one, the one who could light up a room with a story and twist a knife behind your back without blinking. Growing up, he was the type to break a lamp and convince Mom that I did it. And when I got grounded, he'd sit outside my room eating snacks and humming just loud enough to be heard. Petty stuff, sure, but it set the tone. And somehow, no matter what he did, people gave him a pass. We weren't close as adults, but we played the part. Holidays, birthdays, occasional barbecues. Brian was always between jobs, but drove nicer cars than I did. He claimed to be consulting or doing freelance strategy, which basically meant talking fast to get people to loan him money. I was the stable one. I paid my taxes, stayed in one career for nearly 15 years, and kept my life as drama-free as I could. I married Kelly when I was 34, and for a while, we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. We had a modest house in the suburbs, no kids, and a comfortable rhythm to our days. I handled most of the bills. Kelly worked part-time at a floral shop she liked, and we took weekend trips whenever we could afford them. Nothing fancy, just a quiet, grown-up life. The trouble started when Brian came to stay with us for a week. His lease fell through, or so he said, and he needed a place to crash. Kelly wasn't thrilled, but she agreed. I told her it would just be a few days. That was mistake number one. Within the first 2 nights, Brian had claimed the guest room like it was his personal suite. He played loud music in the shower, left dirty dishes in the sink, and started borrowing my cologne and clothes like it was completely normal. I brought it up once, jokingly, and he laughed. "Come on, man, we're family." He always said that. "We're family" was Brian's magic phrase, the one he used to duck responsibility and guilt-trip you in the same breath. At first, Kelly kept a distance. She was polite but cool with him. I noticed she started avoiding the kitchen when he was in it. Said he made her uncomfortable. I asked what that meant, and she just shrugged. "I don't know. He's too familiar." I told her I'd talk to him. I never did. Mistake number 2. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Brian stopped being a guest and started acting like a resident. He ordered takeout using my card without asking. I'd wake up and find him using my laptop, scrolling through spreadsheets and email drafts like he had every right to be there. And worse, Kelly started withdrawing. I'd catch her in the living room, arms folded, barely responding when I asked how her day was. I figured it was stress. We were both working long hours, and having Brian around disrupted everything. But I kept pushing it down. I didn't want to start a war with my brother, especially not in my own house. One evening, I came home to find Brian and Kelly sitting on the couch, laughing. That alone wasn't the problem. It was the way she was laughing. A sharp, almost performative laugh, like she was trying to prove a point. I stood there for a second, watching, then walked past them and went straight to the bedroom. That night, she barely touched me. No kiss, no goodnight, just silence and cold sheets. The next day, I found my toothbrush wet and placed on the opposite side of the counter from where I'd left it. A weird thing to notice, sure, but I knew how I left it. I always do. I asked Brian if he'd used it, and he smirked. "Why would I use your toothbrush? That's gross." No apology, no explanation, just that smug tone. I didn't press it. I should have. Mistake number 3. Then came the texts. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But one afternoon, Kelly left her phone unlocked on the counter while she was upstairs, and a message popped up. From Brian. "He won't even notice, LOL." That was it. Just 6 words. I stared at it for a long minute. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't even know what I was looking for. My stomach just sank. When she came downstairs, I asked, carefully what it meant. She looked at the screen, then back at me, and said, "It's about the takeout from last night." I told him not to order more, but he did. I said you wouldn't notice. That's all. She said it smoothly. No stumble, no hesitation. And I wanted to believe her. I did. Because what else could I do? Accuse her of something based on a 6-word message? But from that day forward, I watched them closer. The way Brian lingered when she was around. The way she started dressing up, even when she wasn't going out. The inside jokes they shared, the casual touches, a hand on the shoulder, a laugh too loud, a story only they seemed to get. I was losing them both. Slowly, quietly. And then came the final blow. It was a Thursday night in March. I had just finished a late Zoom meeting and was grabbing a sandwich in the kitchen when Kelly walked in with her arms crossed and a strange expression on her face. Disgust, maybe, or fear, or something worse. She didn't say anything right away. Just stared at me, like she didn't recognize me. Then she said, "Is it true?" I blinked. "Is what true?" She held up her phone. "That you've been cheating on me." I froze. My stomach dropped into my shoes. "What?" "Brian told me everything," she said, voice rising. "He saw the messages. The hotel receipts. Don't lie, Chase. He showed me everything." I was speechless. No such messages existed. No receipts. No affair. I hadn't so much as looked at another woman since we got married. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind was spinning. This had to be a mistake. A prank. Something. "I can't even look at you," she said. "I want you out. Now." I tried to speak, tried to tell her it wasn't true, that Brian was lying, but she didn't care. The trust was already broken, not by me, but by him. And just like that, with one false whisper from my brother, she chose him over me. I didn't pack properly. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just grabbed the bag she threw at me, walked out barefoot, and kept walking. 1 year later, everything has changed. But the moment she slammed the door shut behind me still echoes in my head. And what Brian didn't know was that night, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost every illusion I had about who I could trust. And that's when everything started to shift. I didn't have a plan that night. I walked until my feet went numb, and when the adrenaline finally wore off, I was sitting on a bench in front of a 24-hour gas station with a duffel bag that barely held a change of clothes, a dead phone, and a splitting headache that made my ears ring. It was early March, but it felt like winter never ended. The kind of cold that clings to your bones, especially when you've just been thrown out of your own house. No shoes, no coat, no warning. I stayed there until sunrise. My phone finally buzzed back to life after I charged it at a wall outlet near the coffee machines. No missed calls, no messages, just an ad from my bank reminding me I'd paid off the mortgage in full the month prior. I remember laughing when I saw that. Bitter, low, hollow laughter. The house she kicked me out of? My name was the only one on the deed. I bought it 2 years before we even got married. But none of that mattered now. I spent that first night in a dingy motel near the edge of town, the kind of place where the vending machines don't work and the towels feel like sandpaper. I paid cash and stared at the ceiling all night, my brain cycling through a carousel of questions. Why didn't I fight back? Why did I let Brian stay? How long had he been plotting this? And why the hell did Kelly believe him so easily? The next morning, I called my friend Marcus. We'd been buddies since high school. He ran a small tech support business out of a co-working space and had always offered me a desk if I ever wanted to freelance. I told him I needed somewhere to land, and without asking a single question, he said, "Come by. I'll make some room." That tiny act of kindness, that sliver of humanity, cracked something in me. For the first time since that night, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. For the next week, I crashed on an old futon in the back of Marcus's office. I showered at a gym 2 blocks away and lived off cheap sandwiches and vending machine coffee. No one at the office asked questions. I think Marcus must have told them I was between things, which, in a way, was true. I was between the life I thought I had and whatever this was. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not Kelly, Brian's. That smug, performative concern he always wore like a mask. "I'm just looking out for you," he used to say. "I'm just trying to help." And now he'd used that mask to bulldoze through my marriage and leave me on the curb. But that wasn't the worst part. A few days later, I got a text from an old college buddy, Daniel. He wasn't close to me or Kelly, just a guy from a few parties and group projects. His message said, "Hey man, sorry to hear about everything. Brian posted something on IG. I figured you should know. I didn't have Instagram. I hadn't used social media in years. But curiosity and dread pushed me to check. I borrowed Marcus's phone and opened the post. There it was. A photo of Brian standing in my kitchen, wearing my hoodie, holding a glass of wine like some champagne villain. The caption read, "Cleaning house, one liar at a time." Some snakes were wedding rings too. Hashtag family first, hashtag truth wins. There were dozens of comments, mutual friends, acquaintances, even some of Kelly's co-workers, all liking it, reacting with emojis, tagging others. One comment read, "Dude, you did the right thing. You're a real one." Another said, "Finally someone exposed him." And that was when I realized he didn't just poison Kelly's trust. He poisoned everyone's. Quietly, carefully, strategically. It was a smear campaign wrapped in family loyalty. And he wasn't done. About a week after I left, I stopped by the house while Kelly was at work. I still had my key, and legally, it was still my house, so I figured I'd grab the rest of my things. Just essentials. Clothes, documents, my old journals, maybe some books. I didn't want anything else. I didn't want to see her. I didn't even want to breathe the same air anymore. But when I stepped inside, it didn't feel like my home. Brian's sneakers were by the door. His duffel bag was gone. His cologne lingered in the hallway. The guest room, the one he'd claimed like a squatter, was now completely empty. Like he'd moved into the master bedroom. No, I didn't want to think it. I didn't want to believe it. But then I walked into the master bedroom, and my closet had been rearranged. My things had been moved to the far left, crammed like an afterthought. And on the nightstand, next to where Kelly slept, was a photo of her and Brian. Not hugging, just smiling. But still, a framed photo. I stood there in silence. My hands curled into fists. My throat felt like it had closed up. It was one thing for Brian to lie. But this was something darker. I didn't take much when I left. Just my documents, my laptop, a couple of shirts. I didn't even touch the wedding album. I remember standing over it, wondering what I was supposed to do with all those memories. Were they all fake? Was she pretending the whole time? Was he? That night, I went back to the futon, stared at the ceiling again, and made myself a promise. I was done waiting. I was done licking wounds and hoping people came to their senses. If the world wanted to believe Brian's version of the story, fine. Let them. I'd show them the truth in a language they couldn't ignore. Over the next few weeks, something in me shifted. I stopped scrolling through messages I'd never sent. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't ask. Instead, I did what I've always done best. I worked. I started freelancing. Quietly. Built a few client lists from old contacts. Pulled some strings. Got some startup gigs. Nothing fancy at first. Just digital logistics work, back-end coordination, delivery route optimization. But I was good at it. I always had been. And the demand was there. People wanted what I knew how to do, and they were willing to pay for it. Marcus let me use a corner of his office as my own. I hung a whiteboard, took meetings in the coffee shop downstairs, and slowly started carving something out of the wreckage. My old life was gone, but this was a blueprint for something new. Meanwhile, Brian kept posting. Always vague, always manipulative. "Tough love is still love," he wrote once. "Some bridges need burning to light your way." Another time, he posted a boomerang of him sipping wine at my old fire pit with the caption, "Healing vibes. House full of peace now." And Kelly? Radio silence. No texts. No apologies. Just the occasional Instagram tag in Brian's posts, like a ghost wearing her face. But people talk. Especially the ones who don't know they're being listened to. One afternoon, while I was grabbing coffee downstairs, I ran into Lisa, a friend of Kelly's from the floral shop. We weren't close, but she always liked me. She looked surprised to see me, and even more surprised when I smiled, and said hello like everything was normal. She hesitated, then said, "I thought you moved." "I did," I said. "Temporarily." "What did you hear?" Lisa glanced around, then leaned in. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything. But Brian told Kelly you were cheating with some woman in Miami. Said he had proof. Said he followed your IP address or something." I stared at her. I haven't even been to Miami in 4 years. She winced. "Yeah, I figured. I never really bought it." But Kelly, she was devastated. Brian was with her a lot. Like a lot. She really leaned on him. I nodded slowly. "Thanks for telling me." That night, I sat in my shared co-working corner, staring at the wall, connecting the final dots. He didn't just lie to her. He engineered the whole thing, fabricated evidence, weaponized my tech habits, maybe even spoofed some logins. He knew just enough about my work to fake something that sounded believable, and she didn't question it. Not once. That was the moment I stopped blaming just him. The breaking point didn't come in the form of yelling or a public explosion. It came in quiet realizations, the ones that strip away your last illusions. The moment you realized that the people closest to you were only close because you were convenient, that your silence made their noise louder, that your love made it easier for them to twist the knife. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was focused, laser focused. They took everything from me, my name, my home, my reputation. But they left me with one thing, one powerful, dangerous thing, time. And I was about to use every second of it. The lowest point wasn't the night I got kicked out. It wasn't even finding my hoodie on Brian's smug shoulders or the framed photo of him and Kelly on my nightstand. The lowest point came quietly, about 3 weeks after everything fell apart, when I was sitting alone in the office on a Friday night, long after Marcus and his team had left. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and outside the windows, the city had gone still. That kind of stillness you only notice when you feel like the last person in the world who matters to no one. I had just finished a freelance logistics consultation that barely paid $500, and I got the email at midnight. The client had gone with a cheaper competitor for their full-time role. They thanked me for the value I brought and said they'd keep me in mind for future needs. Translation: you did good work, but we don't need you. I closed my laptop, sat back, and felt this overwhelming wave of emptiness. Not sadness, not even anger, just a dull ache where my future used to be. I thought of what I'd built over the years, the reliable career, the house, the marriage, the reputation, and realized all of it had slipped away in silence. No explosion, just erosion. For the first time in my life, I felt invisible. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed. Or the futon, I guess. Marcus didn't say anything. He just left a box of protein bars and a note that said, "You're still in the game. Don't forget that." He knew something was up. He just didn't pry. That's the kind of friend he was. But something about that note hit me harder than any accusation or insult had. Maybe because it reminded me that someone still believed in me, even when I didn't. And slowly, piece by piece, I started putting things back together. First, I made a new routine. Wake up, shower, walk, no matter what. Even if I had no meetings or money coming in, I'd get dressed, lace up my sneakers, and walk a few miles. Through the neighborhood, around the lake, through old business districts. It cleared my head, gave me structure, purpose. I stopped letting my thoughts spiral into what-ifs and whys. Instead, I made a new rule: no more thinking about Kelly or Brian during daylight. Second, I rebuilt my network. Not the fake social ones. Not the birthday texts or distant LinkedIn connections. I started with people I knew respected my work. Old clients, managers, vendors. I didn't beg for opportunities. I just checked in, offered help, shared what I was working on. And little by little, the doors cracked open. One of them, a client from 2 years back named Preeti, ran a small import-export firm that had gotten crushed by COVID supply chain issues. She was trying to digitize her entire backend and streamline distribution, but the people she'd hired were either too expensive or too flaky. I offered to help her design a scalable delivery framework for a flat project fee. No invoices, no scope creep, just clean, efficient results. She said yes. That one project turned into 3, and 3 turned into a referral. Within a month, I had 5 clients, all small businesses, all desperate for better logistics. And I had just enough savings left to form an LLC and open a business checking account. I called it ArtBridge Logistics. The name didn't mean much at first. I just liked the way it sounded, strong, dependable. But it stuck. I rented a small corner office in a building not far from Marcus's. Nothing fancy, just a space to work that wasn't a futon. I brought in a whiteboard, a second monitor, and a coffee maker I rescued from a pawn shop. And every morning, I'd walk in, brew a cup, write my daily goals on the board, and treat myself like I was already running a 7-figure company. No one was watching. No one needed to believe in me. I just did it anyway. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet on social media. No posts. No announcements. No retaliation. Let them think I was spiraling. Let Brian enjoy his moment. Because I was building something better than a comeback. I was building leverage. Still, it wasn't easy. Every step forward came with a weight I couldn't shake. Nights were the worst. That's when the memories crept in. Sunday morning pancakes with Kelly, late-night board game marathons. Even that time we'd gotten caught in the rain, and she made me promise we'd never take each other for granted. All of that felt like a movie I barely remembered starring someone else. And yet, I never called her. Not once. I came close. Once, when I saw a photo of her at a wedding with Brian. He had his hand around her waist, and her smile looked so forced. Not sad. Not fake. Just tired. Like someone playing a part. I stared at that picture for 10 full minutes, then deleted it. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. She made her choice, and I was finally starting to make mine. By month 4, ArtBridge was doing more business than I could handle alone. I brought on a part-time assistant, Amanda, a former operations manager who'd been laid off from a larger firm. She worked from home and helped me juggle contracts, update CRM, and prep onboarding docs. Within 2 weeks, I doubled my output. Within 6, I hired a junior analyst. Then a second. The business was becoming real. More real than my old life ever was. The irony wasn't lost on me. Getting kicked out had freed me. The betrayal, the exile, it stripped away every distraction, every piece of dead weight I didn't know I was carrying. It hurt like hell, but it cleared the path. I started sleeping better, smiling more, eating real meals again. I bought a used but decent car, nothing flashy, just functional. And with the first real payment from a long-term logistics contract, I leased a 1-bedroom loft downtown. Exposed brick, wide windows, polished concrete floors. It wasn't home yet, but it was mine. And that's when something strange started happening. People began reaching out. Not many at first. Just a couple of mutuals from the old circle. Some were subtle. Hey, man, haven't seen you around. Hope you're well. Others were direct. Saw ArtBridge is making moves. Congrats. Even Marcus pulled me aside one day and said, I don't know what you're doing, man, but people are talking. I shrugged. Good talking or bad talking? He smiled. Doesn't even matter anymore. Just keep doing what you're doing. It was a weird feeling. I hadn't posted anything, hadn't even updated my LinkedIn. But word was getting out. I was rebuilding faster than anyone expected. And quietly, people were noticing. One of those people, apparently, was Kelly. It started with an email. Just a subject line. Can we talk? No greeting. No signature. Just those 4 words and a blank body. I didn't reply. Then came a text a week later. I just want to explain. Please. I ignored it. 2 days after that, another one. You don't have to forgive me. I just want to talk. I sat with that one for a while. Not because I wanted to talk. I didn't. But because I wanted to understand what finally pushed her to reach out. And the answer came a few days later, in the form of a very familiar knock. I opened my door, and there she was, Kelly. Same eyes, same voice, but a different presence. Smaller somehow, hollowed out. She didn't smile. She just said, Can I come in? And that's when I realized. Something had happened. Something big. But what? I didn't let her in. Not yet. Because I wanted to hear every word of it right where she stood, out in the hallway, face to face, without walls to protect either of us. And what she told me, well, that's where things really began to shift. She stood in the hallway like a stranger waiting for a bus, clutching her purse, not meeting my eyes, breathing too fast. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, not saying a word. I didn't invite her in, didn't even ask why she was there. I just waited. She finally looked up and said, I know I don't deserve to be here. I didn't argue. I didn't believe it at first, she went on, voice shaking. I thought it was just business trouble, but then I saw the accounts. And the messages. And she paused, visibly swallowing hard. And the girls. I stayed quiet. He told me you were cheating, she said. But he was the one. The whole time. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic how predictable it all was. How thoroughly Brian had followed his own playbook. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even flinch. I thought he loved me, she whispered. Or at least that he cared. Still, I said nothing. She looked up again, and this time, she saw the truth in my face, that I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't bitter. I was done. Kelly took a breath like she was about to say something else, but I cut her off. Is he still in the house? Her expression answered that before she did. No. He left 3 weeks ago. I don't know where. He took the car, emptied the joint account. She hesitated. I didn't even know it was joint. He must have. He must have forged something. Of course he did. Brian was always good at skipping steps. Forging documents, signing names, manipulating paperwork. The kind of guy who could convince a landlord to give him a key with a wink and a handshake. The type to open an account in someone else's name and leave them with the overdraft fees. It was never personal with him. It was just what he did. People were pawns, including her. She must have expected me to offer some comfort. Some form of "I told you so," wrapped in kindness. But I didn't. I wasn't here to console her. I wasn't her rebound therapist. I was the man she threw away like junk. You lied for him, I finally said. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You just decided I was guilty because he said so. I know, she said quickly, like she'd been rehearsing it. And I'll regret it forever. I was stupid. I was. You were comfortable. I cut in. You picked the story that made the least noise in your head. That's not love. That's convenience. She didn't argue. There was silence for a while. Then she nodded, as if accepting the verdict. I know I can't fix what I broke, she said. I just wanted you to know the truth. That he used me. That I see it now. That I see you now. And then she turned and left. No tears. No screaming. No begging. Just walked away, back down the hall, and into whatever version of loneliness she'd earned. I closed the door slowly. And that's when the real clarity hit me. Brian hadn't just destroyed a marriage. He had stolen my life. My name. My stability. He used me as a ladder, climbing one rung at a time, until he could leap off and leave me to rot in the mud. And now? Now he was gone. Vanished. Probably pulling the same con somewhere new. Or trying to. But this time, I wasn't going to let him disappear into the fog. I had money now. Power. Reach. And more importantly, I had nothing to lose. The setup began that same night. First I dug. Not just into Brian's past, but into my own. Every email he'd ever forwarded, every document he'd touched, every text I still had backed up in the cloud. I started piecing together a digital timeline of his presence in my life over the last decade. And what I found was worse than I expected. He'd been borrowing money in my name since 2019. Small things at first. PayPal accounts linked to old shared devices, Venmo accounts using my profile picture, even a credit card pre-approval I'd once tossed in the trash that he apparently dug out and activated. For $100 here. $1,200 there. Never enough to trip the alarms. Just enough to skim off the top. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with one of the banks and hired a forensic accountant to review my financials. That alone cost me $8,000. But it was worth every penny. Turns out, Brian had been using a layered strategy, stacking shell companies and fake invoices under my old consulting business's name. When I thought I was struggling to close deals in 2020, he was faking invoices for imaginary gigs and collecting the money through drop accounts under variations of my name. Chase B. Warren. C. Blake Warren. Warren C. Blake. The man had literally become me on paper. I spent 2 weeks gathering evidence. Hired a lawyer. Froze every account I suspected he had access to. Filed reports with the IRS, the banks, even old clients he'd impersonated me with. I played it by the book. But revenge, true revenge, isn't about justice. It's about control. So I started planning the second part. Brian had always wanted recognition. Fame, even. He didn't care about stability. He wanted to be seen as successful. To walk into a bar, name drop someone, and have everyone nod in admiration. His ego was his currency, which meant I didn't have to destroy his finances to ruin him. I just had to destroy his reputation. And I knew exactly where to start. Through one of my logistics clients, a guy named James who ran a warehouse operation in Florida, I tracked down a woman Brian had recently dated. Her name was Clara. She was bright, direct, and had apparently been burned pretty badly. He'd told her he was starting a tech-driven import company and needed her help writing up business proposals. Then he ghosted her after convincing her to send him $4,000 to secure a shipment of European prototypes. Sounded fake when I heard it. Still sounded fake when I read the emails. But Clara kept everything. Bank receipts, email chains, even voice messages where he promised her they'd move to Atlanta together once his funding came through. I offered to pay her back the $4,000, with interest, if she'd share everything with my legal team. She agreed. Happily. Next, I reached out to a recruiter friend I knew from years ago. Told him I was vetting a candidate for a new logistics startup and wanted to verify some resume claims. I fed him Brian's fake resume. He laughed. Man, Half these companies don't even exist anymore. Exactly, I said. Mind running it through your back-channel grapevine? Already did. Couple of red flags. I'll loop you in when I hear more. Within a week, I had 3 former contacts emailing me privately asking, "Is this guy legit?" Brian had apparently been trying to land a director-level role using my old portfolio, dressing it up like he'd built ArtBridge himself. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Now I had threads, real ones. I pulled more. Registered an LLC using his name. Reserved domains like brianwarrenlogistics.com and brian-warren-exposed.net. Created burner emails. I even bought ads on social media targeted at companies he'd previously worked with, using keywords like scam alert. Is your contractor really who he says he is? I never accused him directly. I didn't have to. Just cast a shadow big enough to block out his spotlight. Then came the final piece. Kelly. I didn't want her back. That ship had sunk, burned, and been buried. But she still had one thing I needed. Access. She had mail with his last known address. Knew old passwords. Knew where he kept backups. She even had a paper trail of purchases he'd made while staying in my house. I didn't have to beg. She offered it. Whether out of guilt or spite, I didn't ask. But when she handed over the folder, a real, physical folder with receipts and bank printouts and scribbled passwords, I knew I was holding the detonator. And when I flipped through the final few pages, I found something I never expected. A loan application, signed in my name, with her listed as a co-signer, dated before I was kicked out. That was the moment the last piece clicked into place. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was premeditated. He hadn't just lied to Kelly. He used her to build the lie, coerced her signature, blurred her lines, and then discarded her once he got what he wanted. Now I had motive, paperwork, witnesses, and most importantly, momentum. Brian had no idea any of this was happening. No clue I'd built a company, rebuilt my life, and was now circling his castle with fire. But he was about to find out. By the time everything was in place, it didn't even feel like revenge anymore. It felt like math. Clean, precise, unavoidable. Brian had always operated like he was in a movie, a fast-talking antihero who believed he could finesse his way out of anything. He saw people as props, situations as puzzles to manipulate. He never thought consequences applied to him, because for most of his life, they didn't. Everyone else cleaned up his messes. Until now. I waited another 6 weeks before I pulled the first lever. I wanted distance. Time for him to get comfortable, settle into his next con, feel like the storm had passed. It didn't take long to find him. A private investigator I hired tracked him to Austin, Texas. He was living in a rented condo under the name Brian Carrington, claiming to be a logistics consultant for a fictional shipping startup. He was driving a leased BMW, living on money skimmed from a fake invoice trail, and, true to form, dating 2 women, neither of whom knew about the other. Classic Brian. The first domino fell with a registered letter, sent to both the condo and the P.O. box he'd been using. It was a polite, professional cease and desist from ArtBridge Logistics, stating that he had been fraudulently misrepresenting himself as an executive of our company and that further use of our intellectual property would result in legal action. I knew he'd ignore it. That was the point. 4 days later, I launched a digital press release campaign. The article was titled, "When the Scam Wears a Familiar Face: How One Man Stole a Life and Faked a Career." I didn't name him directly, but I didn't need to. The breadcrumbs were all there. The fake companies, the forged invoices, the multiple aliases, the women he conned. And most importantly, the receipts. Redacted bank statements. Fake resumes. Voicemail transcriptions. Testimonies from Clara and 2 other women I tracked down. Enough documentation to send chills down the spine of any potential employer Googling his name. The article went viral within a niche crowd: recruiters, small business owners, startup founders. It got picked up by a business ethics blog and a YouTube commentator who specialized in corporate scams. Within 48 hours, Brian Carrington was getting calls from 3 different companies, none of them offering a job, all of them asking questions. But that was just the appetizer. Next, I filed a formal fraud complaint with the Texas Department of Banking, attaching everything my legal team had compiled, from forged loan documents to co-signed debt in my name. At the same time, I submitted identical documentation to the FTC, IRS, and several financial institutions he had interacted with under my identity. Identity theft. wire fraud, tax evasion, the works. And then I pressed send on the final stroke. An anonymous tip to his building's management, flagging that Brian Carrington was not only in violation of his lease agreement by using the condo as a place of business, but had submitted a fraudulent credit history application. I included PDFs for their review. Within 3 days, they gave him 30 days to vacate. By the end of that week, Brian tried calling me. Not texting, not emailing, calling. I let it ring out. He called again the next day. This time I answered. I wanted to hear it. Chase. His voice cracked a little. Look, man, I don't know what you're doing, but we need to talk. Why? I asked calmly. You didn't want to talk last year. Remember? When you said I was a cheater, and you smiled while she threw me out of my own house. I didn't mean, he began, but I cut him off. You forged my name, Brian. You used my credit. You ruined my marriage, my business reputation, and you thought I'd just go away. There was silence. Then a sharp inhale. I didn't ruin it, he said quickly. You left. You could have fought for her. I stepped in when you gave up. You lied. I snapped. You made it all up. And then you used her. Used everyone. For what? A few grand? Some free rent. She knew what she was getting into. He muttered, like that made it better. No, she didn't, I said, voice dropping to a whisper. But she does now. Another pause. You sent that article out, didn't you? I didn't answer. You're trying to ruin me. No, I said. You did that yourself. I'm just putting a spotlight on it. That was the last time we spoke. By the end of the month, the fallout began. The condo dropped his lease. One of the women he'd been seeing filed a small claims lawsuit for the money she'd given him. The second woman, turns out she worked for a major online financial publication, wrote a blog post titled, I Dated a Professional Liar, that made its way to the front page of Medium. The recruiters blacklisted him. The banks flagged him. He went dark again, disappeared from social media, changed his number. But it was too late. The echo followed him. Even if he started fresh in another city, the search results wouldn't lie. The debt wouldn't vanish. The investigation was active now, and financial crimes don't have a short memory. And as for Kelly, she sold the house 6 months after Brian left, paid off the remaining mortgage, and moved in with her sister. Last I heard, she was working 2 jobs and going to therapy. We never spoke again after that day in the hallway. I didn't need closure. I'd already found it. What surprised me most wasn't the satisfaction of watching it all unravel. It was how empty the revenge felt once it was done. There was no applause, no victory dance, just peace. Quiet, still peace. For the first time in my adult life, there was no chaos orbiting me. No one leeching off my kindness, no backdoor betrayals, no walking on eggshells around people I once called family. ArtBridge Logistics crossed 7 figures in revenue that fall. We opened a second office, hired 6 more full-time staff. I moved into a house near the bay, smaller than the last one, but filled with real light, real friends, and not a single thing I didn't choose for myself. Sometimes people ask why I never went to court for damages. But the truth is, I didn't need a judge to tell me I'd won. I had my name back, my life back, and a future built entirely on my terms. The past is over, and the last thing Brian ever stole was the chance to see who I've become. So no, I don't answer his calls anymore. I don't respond to the burner emails he sends, asking for just a minute of my time. I don't need to. He already knows. And that silence? That's the real revenge.